Okay, 11th and 12th, we are moving on in chapter 26. Yesterday, we left off with talking about the National Labor Relations Act that gave workers the right to practice collective bargaining, demanding specific how much money they make, and then certain conditions. The idea of making sure that you're protected and that you're safe at work, I can totally see that. That's actually a biblical thing. But in some of the cases, the collective bargaining got a little on the crazy side. So we're going to talk a little bit about that today. John L. Lewis organized the Committee of Industrial Organizations within the American Federation of Labor. The CIO organized all the workers within an industry, skilled and unskilled, into a large organization. Now, when unions were first came about in the United States, they were really seen more as guilds, as a chance for someone to improve their skills and to become a master of their craft. That is not what the labor unions are about now, or even back during Roosevelt's day. It's really about giving the workers the preponderancy of the power in a building or in a business. So all the workers are going to be organized. That means they belong to the union. They're all paying dues to the union. And it doesn't matter if they're skilled, which means they've had to do a lot of work to get to the level that they're at, or even if they're unskilled, which means that their training may have taken 20 minutes to figure out how to scan bananas or whatever. So he wanted to put all of the people in an industry under one umbrella organization and have all of them pay dues to the union. This is how the unions make money. This is why they push so hard for unions to be in every single business. It has nothing to do with really protecting workers. It is more about them making cash. That's really what it's all about. So in order to get enough money from the union workers who are looking at union leaders for help, they want to make sure they're safe at work, which that's absolutely honorable. They want to make sure they're making a living wage. I understand that. That's absolutely honorable. To sit down and have somebody talk between the workers and the person who actually owns and put the money and effort into creating the business, I can understand that. That makes sense. But when you start threatening the livelihood of the person who created the business and the livelihood of people who don't necessarily want to belong to the union, I think that's where you're really messed up. Okay. And that's exactly what's going to start happening. So the Congress of Industrial Organizations, the new name of the CIO after it split from the AFL, its president was John Lewis. And then the National Labor Relations Board was the new government agency that encouraged labor unions. Labor unions are a big part of socialist thought. They like the idea that everybody is represented and protected, but they don't take into account the people who actually create the businesses. They, in fact, look at them as enemies, and they really are divisive in the way that they treat, or the way they come about with between the entrepreneurs and the workers. They really push for that divisiveness, and that's a shame, because really a lot of this could be handled with conversation. Okay. If you don't have 59 or 60, because sometimes when I put it in a bubble in another section of the slide, it doesn't show up on the notes. It doesn't copy. So if you don't have it, just go ahead and write it in. I can wait a few minutes. I'll drink tea. I don't mind. Yeah. Okay. And also, if you can always rewind and go back. So let's go on to the next one. The sit-down strike. This is when union members refused to work and barricaded themselves inside the workplace. They threatened violence and the destruction of private property. So labor organizers forced employers to bargain with the union. Even if the employer never wanted to have a union in their business, they were forced into it. And it's just a crying shame, because there were a lot of people who were very seriously hurt and even killed because they didn't want to be part of a union, but they wanted to work and feed their families. There were people who lost their entire business because they didn't want unions in their business. And so the union basically destroyed the business. And then nobody gets to work. So who really wins on that one? Sit-down strikes were really all about going into a business and taking up space and preventing anybody from getting any work done, so that the business owner, who is losing money every day because things aren't being done, they eventually have to cave in and say, okay, fine, we'll have a union if it just means we can get back to work. So this is what I'm talking about. When I really have a hard time with the idea of unions, the way unions, especially back during this time, were really run. It's kind of scary. There's a lot of bullying that went on. Okay, a closed shop is a company that could hire only union members. This wasn't the choice of the person who ran the company. This was the choice of the union, who came in and basically demanded that the company hire only union workers, or they would make sure nobody got hired. They would make sure that nobody could get in to work. Now, Gus Hall was a communist labor organizer, and communism always, every communist country has labor unions. They are not allowed to strike. They are not allowed to collectively bargain, but they're all in a union. Okay. But he was a communist labor organizer. He encouraged labor violence because he believed that the more violence that happened, the more upset everything was, the more it was important for the people who owned the company to just try to make things quiet so they would cave in faster. He ended up becoming the head of the Communist Party USA. We did have a Communist Party in the United States for a period of time, and people did run on that ticket. Okay, in November of 1933, the United States as a nation recognized communist government in Russia. Now, this had taken place, the government takeover in Russia had taken place in 1914 at the very beginning, or near the beginning of World War I, but it had not been recognized worldwide as a nation. It was just seen as an overthrow of a legitimate government. But now our president was looking at the communist nation of Russia and saying, yeah, we want to be able to trade and have, a good fellowship with you and a relationship with you. So he extended the hand of fellowship to the communist government, specifically to Joseph Stalin, who was the new head of the communist government. It started out with Lenin. When he first got into power, he said, we don't need anybody from outside to help us. We can support ourselves. That's what communism does. Rah, 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 we can do this. They ended up going bankrupt in just a few years. And he said, well, we're going to have to trade, but we aren't going to let everybody trade. We are going to trade up here at the top, and we will trade with other nations to make money, and so we don't starve to death. Sometimes you have to take 2 steps backward to get 1 step forward, is how he announced it. Then when he got older and he realized his time on earth was short, he talked to one of his right-hand men named Trotsky, and he told Trotsky, I want you to take over for me when I pass, but be careful of Stalin because he is a scary dude. When Lenin calls you a scary dude, you're a scary dude. So he told Trotsky, beware of Stalin. Be very careful around him. As soon as Lenin died, Stalin put himself in power. Trotsky was there, but he wasn't going to make it for very long. And so it got to the point where Trotsky realized his life was in danger, so he escaped Russia. And he moved as far away from Russia as he could possibly think. He moved to Mexico City, thinking, I am perfectly safe here. He was not. A few years later, he was stabbed in the head with a pickaxe that was used for ice climbing. And pretty sure that assassin was sent by Joseph Stalin, who, by the way, FDR just loved Joseph Stalin. Called him Uncle Joe. Okay, the good neighbor policy. FDR steps to promote friendship with Latin American countries. And one of the things he was really pushing was some of the same socialist ideals. Socialism was really taking root in Latin America. People were excited about the ideas of socialism and communism. In fact, Mexico went through a socialist revolution just before Trotsky made it there. So he was around friends. A lot of the big artists and writers from the 20s and 30s were very socialistic in their ideals for Mexico. Okay, some big news of the 1930s. Al Capone goes to prison for tax evasion. They couldn't get him on anything else, but they got him on tax evasion. Charles Lindbergh's son was kidnapped and murdered. And it is still up for debate whether or not they caught the right people, or if the body of the child was actually the body of Lindbergh's son, or if he was raised as a child in another family. It's really up for debate. But Charles Lindbergh said when they discovered the little boy's body, he said, "Yes, it's my son. Let's just have the funeral and get it over with. I don't want to talk about this. I don't want to deal with this." But a lot of people who saw the body said, "I don't think that's his kid." The people who were convicted and executed were people who worked around his estate. Okay, the Lindbergh Law was passed as a result of that kidnapping, and it established the death penalty in certain cases of interstate kidnapping. If someone is kidnapped and they're taken across state lines, they can be up for the death penalty. Okay. Amelia Earhart became the first woman to pilot an airplane across the Atlantic. Lindbergh had done it before. Now Amelia Earhart's doing it, and then she's going to try and make it across the Pacific as well. By the way, going back to Lindbergh's son, it was the basis of and the inspiration for one of Agatha Christie's greatest novels, Murder on the Orient Express. So it was just made into a movie about 2-3 years ago, and it's excellent. You would love it. It's a good movie to watch with your family. It's really good. Okay. Amelia Earhart, when she tried to fly over the Pacific Ocean, her plane vanished somewhere in the South Pacific while making a round-the-world flight. They keep thinking, well, we found more evidence that maybe she landed here, maybe she was captured, maybe she died on impact, maybe she lived on Desert Island for a period of time. The truth is we just don't have enough evidence to absolutely say what happened to her. Nobody really knows. The German Zeppelin, the Hindenburg, exploded, killing 36 people, and many consider it to be the most dramatic event of the decade because a radio reporter was on the scene to give a live broadcast of the accident. Now, if we were in the classroom, we'd be watching the Hindenburg explosion. I can't do that because, I'm not there, but you can look it up on YouTube and watch it and listen to the man as he's actually having a breakdown while watching this horrible event playing down, showing in front of him. It's famous for the line, "Oh, the humanity," because he was sorrowing over the human beings who were losing their lives right in front of him. It was very, very dramatic. If you want to see what a Zeppelin would have looked like, you can watch. Here's another film recommendation. Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. They actually spend a little bit of time on a Zeppelin. So it's worth watching. The Supreme Court began to challenge some of the New Deal programs, saying that maybe they weren't really, up to snuff when it came to the Constitution. So it declared that the NRA was unconstitutional because it attempted to regulate the supply and demand of goods, and that deprived consumers of a just price. They still found ways to get around that, but yeah, that was one of the things that was discovered to be unconstitutional. I'll let you write that down. Okay. FDR wasn't happy with some of the things that were said about him by the court. So he decided that he was going to ask Congress for the power to appoint 6 new justices, one for every justice that was over 70 years old, so he could get a New Deal majority on the Supreme Court. He was denied. They said, no, you can't do that. But when the older justices died or retired, he replaced them with his supporters. And they call that packing the court, meaning that he is getting the majority of people who are going to do what he says on the court and find in his favor. It's really more beneficial to people in the United States to have a court that is somewhat conservative and somewhat liberal at the same time so that they can balance each other out. Right now, we have an excellent balance. We have some very liberal judges, we have very conservative judges, and they balance each other out, which is a good thing. Okay, the brain trust. For some reason, people who really embrace the ideas of socialism and communism see themselves as being very, very intelligent. They see themselves as being elite and elitist. They are smarter than everybody else. The government should be run by people who are very intelligent and not just by your average schmo. It should be, run by people who are, have got the goods, the high IQs, not by people who do things like, start their own businesses or, have experience in real life. No, we don't want that. We just want people who have really no experience in real life running our lives. No, we don't want that. Okay. Now, FDR, who reinterpreted the Constitution to mean that the government had broad powers to provide for people's needs, he got together a group of advisors that he called the Brain Trust. And a lot of these were people who were from colleges. They were college professors. It sounds like a great idea. You get the smartest, the brightest, the best. But these were people who, didn't have a lot of practical experience in areas like agriculture and business. And we're a country that really survives and thrives on business. So a lot of these guys didn't have a lot of practical application for what they were doing, but they looked at the Constitution and they said, you know what? In the constitutional preamble, there's life, liberty, pursuit of happiness, but there's also the reason for the Constitution. We've got the in the preamble, it says something about the general welfare. The general welfare is really about not the government giving us welfare. That portion of the Constitution, when it's read, really is about giving us the freedom to look out for our welfare. It's that freedom, our liberty to do that ourselves. But the Brain Trust said, no, that's the government's job, is to look out for our welfare. It sounds good. It's not good. Because when someone else controls everything you do, you've lost all your freedom. And what they choose as good for you may not be good for you. Okay, Francis Perkins was the Secretary of Labor who supported the Social Security Act, even when concerned that the act might be constitutional. If you're concerned that an act that you have your name on is unconstitutional, that's not a good thing. And then the New York Senator Robert Wagner said, I do not think we will ever have an industry in order until we have a nationally planned economy. That's socialism. When you have a nationally planned economy, that is socialism. That is a few people telling everybody else what to sell, what to buy, what to plant, when to harvest, how much they can sell their goods for. That is socialism, and it does not work ever. Never has, never will, because it discounts human nature, first of all. And second of all, the people who consider themselves the elite, the most intelligent, usually don't have any practical experience. We need that balance, people. Okay, the Fair Labor Standard Act. This started explaining to the people, okay, we are going to compel businesses to follow these laws. Now, here's the thing. Many of these laws or these acts were already being done. Ford Motor Company, for instance, was the first company to say no more than 40 hours per week is required of a worker. They also gave a base wage of $5 an hour, which was really high for the day. So this was already being done by individual companies, but now the United States as a whole is saying you are compelled to do this to every single company. Not every company can afford to do this. But they established a minimum wage. That means you have to be paid a certain amount, especially if you're a union member. And then you can not let people work any more than 40 hours per week. That's what is required. Again, sounds good on paper, but there are some people who are perfectly happy working more than 40 hours a week. And this isn't for everybody, honestly, because as a teacher, I sometimes work more than 40 hours a week. I'm not, chained to my desk or anything, but, even with the quarantine, there have been a couple of mornings when Mr. S has gotten up and he's got to go to work, and I just pull my computer onto my lap while I'm still in bed and I'm grading papers, or I'm creating a slideshow, or I'm contacting people, just don't forget to turn this in on this day. I'm starting to work right then. And then when he comes home at the end of the day, he'll see me and I'm sitting, I've already done 6 lectures, I've graded more papers, and I'm sitting on the couch again with my computer in my lap. And he'll say, wow, okay, you're still working? And I'm like, yeah. And I still have a lot to do, because for teachers especially, it's amazing how much you can't get done in the course of a day. Okay. Just think, 62 kids, 2 classes for each kid, and then multiple assignments for each class. Yeah, I am grading all the time and I'm still really behind. So the 40 hours per work week, that sounds great. And that's for people who are paid by the hour. I'm not paid by the hour, I'm paid salary. So if people who are in management, they will often work way more than 40 hours per week. Minimum wage for union members or people who are federal employees is a thing, but every time minimum wage goes up by law, people who own businesses have to usually let somebody go so that they can pay their other workers at minimum wage, or else they'll have to raise their prices so they can pay their workers at minimum wage. When people raise their prices, people don't come in. They just say, oh, burritos went up from 69 cents to $1.29. Forget that. Okay, it's still $1.29, but you understand what I'm saying? People will just say, no, I'm not going to pay that. So it can actually hurt businesses too. And then abolish child labor. Okay, can we just have a laugh at this? It abolished some of child labor. Child labor still exists. And the worst group of people who push child labor are the people who rally the strongest for labor unions. And that is the Hollywood crowd. They are the biggest users of child labor probably in the United States. Okay, you may have noticed when you're watching TV shows that there will be twins that play the part of a child, or triplets. When somebody's having a baby on a show, they'll bring out babies. There are very strict rules for child labor, but child labor still exists. So children, even babies who can't say, yeah, you know what, I was just born 3 weeks ago, I think I would like to play a newborn on TV. They don't have any say in that. That's their parents deciding that they can be, used as an actor. But for a lot of the TV shows, like if you grew up watching Full House or Full House reruns, you know that Michelle was played by twins. And that's because the twin could only be on set for so long before they had to take a break. They had to take a mandatory union break. Same thing for the older kids on the same show. They had school that they had to do, and they had to do union breaks, and they had, a lot that was put on them because they had to follow these child labor laws. But child labor still exists. So when we talk about abolishing child labor, it didn't really abolish. It just tweaked it a bit. It meant kids weren't working in coal mines. Yay, that's a good thing. I'm all for that. Kids shouldn't be working in coal mines. Kids weren't working in match factories. That's a good thing. But to say that child labor was abolished, no, it wasn't. No. Okay. And in fact, there have been a lot of child labor laws passed as a result of people in old Hollywood stealing all the money from their kid. They put their kid out there to work and then took all their kid's money. And the kid ended up with nothing when they grew up. Okay, back to the Great Depression, which is going on through this whole thing. After 6 years of government job programs, regulations, deficit spending, over 9 million people were still unemployed. FDR's programs marked the beginning of government interference in many aspects of the economy and people's everyday lives. And then historians who've gone back, they said, you know what? Turns out the Depression was probably just about over when he started all this stuff, and he actually extended the time of the Depression. 6 years, government programs, regulation, and deficit spending still had 9 million people unemployed. Unbelievable. Okay, that's it for today. I'll leave that on so you can finish. All right, we are like 6 minutes early, which is a good thing, I think. So we'll start again on Monday, starting with the very next set of notes. Don't forget to do a little bit of homework every day so that you never get snowed under. I never want that for any of you, but you know that about me. So have a really excellent weekend, and I'll talk to you again on Monday. Bye.